This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
GPS, happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to you, Mark. How are you?
I could not be better. And we should spin a wheel as to what case we want to talk about. I was just speaking with a anchor from Boston who will not be named because apparently it violates her contract. But Karen Reed, see if you can find a TikTok, because somewhere I'm told that they had some fun today, some fun this week, cross-examining the number. For those who aren't in the weeds, Karen Reed is the retrial after a hung jury, and she's accused of running over her boyfriend and leaving him to die in the snow, even though the main witness has already testified and been cross-examined and looks ridiculous. But the cop, who was the investigating officer in the first case, when it was revealed that there were all kinds of text messages, which I will not read, but were, to say the least, showed a bias, ended up getting fired. So now they have come up with cop number 2. And cop number 2, from what I'm hearing, I don't know if you've been able to look it up, although for those who don't know or aren't in the weeds, when Gary's eyes do this thing and then people will be in the comments, it's because he's both co-hosting and searching for media, because I'm freestyling right now. Is that important?
Oh, I thought my eyes were doing this because I hate you, clearly.
Or because you're a serial killer in your...
Sure.
That's the other one.
Yeah, that's what we should spin a wheel on. Why are Gary's eyes crazy? Is it he's hatred for Mark, he's a serial killer, or, pick your own adventure?
So the one I would love to see is that I believe this judge who, let's just say, charitably, has no business presiding over this case. This judge called a convenient recess at a point where the witness was melting down. If you find it, we'll see it. The thing about this case that is just mind-boggling to me is how in the world, given all, I understand it's a small community and I understand that it's an insular community, but I don't remember last time I looked at both state and federal constitutions and due process, I didn't see an exception for it's a small community or it's insular or everybody's related to everybody, therefore it doesn't matter. Because my understanding is that the cross-examination revealed a kind of a gotcha moment, to which the judge conveniently decided to take a recess so that they could reset. And I don't know, but if it happened and there was not an admonition that the prosecution should not talk to their witness, that in and of itself is misconduct and should be addressed as well.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a hard time finding this because just with those keywords, I'm finding a lot of different things and I can't really preview them while we're live recording right here. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it, but it's been a wild trial. They've got this new investigator that you're referencing on the stand talking about how the investigation was done with complete integrity. Meanwhile, the main investigator who did all of the investigation has been fired for gross misconduct and text messages where he calls Miss Reed a whack job cunt and all this other very colorful language. I know you said you weren't going to read them out loud, but
thank you for doing the heavy lifting.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not a respected lawyer, so I can go ahead and say a few of these things and face a little less admonition. So,
yeah, it's been quite a trial. It was kind of gripping the media. It was kind of the media ground zero, but that's the, if you will, the tipping point. I think we went back. In the media, you weren't out there at Van Nuys. I was Friday.
I was there in spirit.
Yeah, Menendez was quite a scene, and the judge rightfully and I think correctly ruled in Menendez that the DA on this particular version of their Hail Mary could not once again try to withdraw.
Yeah, third time wasn't a charm.
The third time was not a charm. One of the few times, and maybe somebody who's watching who's a lawyer can tell me, it's exceedingly rare, if not unheard of, for the elected DA to come into court and argue a motion, let alone a motion with this kind of, game-breaking kind of consequences. And sure enough, we went in on Friday, and who was there but Mr. Hochman, the elected DA, I believe his brother, his security detail, his 3 deputy DAs, and he's the one who argued the motion unsuccessfully, I might add, to withdraw his predecessor's motion initiating resentencing. Interestingly, little fun fact, the AG when you file what's called a motion to recuse or a 1424 motion, in California, you have to give 10 court days notice, and you have to notify the Attorney General. The Attorney General of the state of California is Rob Bonta. Rob Bonta is a Democrat who shellacked Nathan Hochman in 2022 when Nathan Hochman was the Republican candidate, statewide candidate for Attorney General. Then Hochman changed his registration to independent, hardy har har.
Yeah.
And beat Gascon, who was vilified as a soft on crime DA, kind of in a election in LA County. For some reason, I think there was an article that was written in LA Mag that I'd referenced that talked about it. He now thinks that LA County, inexplicably, he's reinstituted the death penalty, which talk about exalting form over substance. The death row has been disbanded in California. Breaking news over a year ago.
Right.
There is nobody on death row. The governor has put a moratorium on it, yet form exceeds Trump's substance. So LA County now is instituted the death penalty. LA County, as I have so many friends who say I voted for Nathan Hochman. I don't understand why he's so fixated on the Menendez brothers. Can't he go deal with the looters in the Palisades or Altadena? To which I respond, I don't know that there's that many cameras that are over sitting out front of those particular areas, but give him credit. He's willing to take an L, and he took an L on Friday, and we go back on Tuesday and Wednesday to finally, after 30 years since they were sentenced to life without, to a resentencing after, I think, about 30 years, almost 30 years to the day. It's been quite a turn of events.
Yes, it has. And, to your point, I think that I read that the looting arrests in Altadena and the Palisades are up, somewhere around 450%. And they're setting up new AI cameras to try to combat it. But no, let's for sure reinstate the death penalty, even though the state is never going to do anything about it, because that's a great headline.
My father, who I often talk about and whose picture is over my shoulder, had an unblemished record on the death penalty. When he was a DA, he won every death penalty case, dropping the death penalty. They used to call it dropping the pill, if you can believe how that. And as a defense lawyer, defended many death penalty cases, never lost a death penalty case. He had an unblemished record both as a DA and as a defense lawyer. And he never really understood the death penalty because his analysis of it was, he used to say this, and I'll channel Pops as I'm sitting here. He used to say, I was a DA for over 13 years or whatever it was. He says, I will tell you that the DA's office is not that much different than the DMV. They're both governmental bureaucracies. And if you're would you trust the DMV to make decisions involving life and death? He says, that's why would you trust the DA's office to make decisions involving life and death, which that's the framework that I grew up in. And that's coming from a guy who used to prosecute and drop. I'll never forget, one of his proudest moments, I used to recoil at it, is when he says, I dropped the pill on 2 guys, 2 death penalties on Good Friday. I said, Jesus, that's diabolical. To drop the pill on 2 people on a Good Friday. But that was also back when you would convict somebody of first-degree murder, and he said they'd be eligible and out after 5 years, serving 5 years custody, if you can believe that. Fast forward now, we've got 2 young men who were convicted of patricide, and they've been there life without for 35 years.
Yeah, it's such a good analogy. I know the attorney out in New York, James Sexton, who's focused on divorce. And I heard him on the Flagrant podcast recently, and he was talking about prenups and how everyone has one, and whether it's written by a lawyer, or between the 2 people who are getting married, or by the government. And he used the same DMV analogy. He said, would you like the DMV or, some other government office like that writing your, agreement on how things are going to get split up in the fairly likely case that you're going to dissolve your marriage? And it's very well said, because no, everyone who's been to a DMV knows that is an absolute shit show. Even with an appointment, you're going to wait and you're not going to get helped very well. And why would you leave anything, especially something like life or death, to government officials like that? It's ludicrous.
And I employ the DMV coming on the heels this week of the real ID deadline.
Oh God!
I was just going through the airport, and the TSA person whispered, "Well, it's okay if you don't have it, you don't have your passport. They'll they will just pat you down more." So I said, that's the secret. Sexton, I saw on Huberman.
Yeah, he was on Huberman as well.
He brought up an interesting statistic. Speaking of prenups, he said he thinks out of the hundreds, if not 1,000 prenups that he has written, he says he does 2 or 3 a week, which makes perfect sense. That out of that, maybe 1,000 prenups, that he would say only 5 have ever had to go to court afterwards. That if you go in with the expectation of working it out and kind of understanding that a marriage, unfortunately, is also a financial transaction, if you go in with your eyes wide open, and I will tell you that the 5 out of maybe 1,000, which is an incredible statistic, but I take him at his word. He's very accomplished. If that is true, I wonder what the question I would have asked if I was Huberman is, how many of those people said, nah, we don't want a prenup, and walked out the door? And what was the percentage of those who didn't get a prenup and didn't have them write the prenup who ended up getting divorced? Or when one of the spouses says, I don't want a prenup because I'm getting married for love.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think that honestly, we might need to have him on in the near future so that you can ask him that question, because I know he's been kind of doing the rounds, plugging a new startup he has called trustedprenup.com, where he's looking to kind of eliminate the barrier where instead of it being, thousands of dollars, it's a little cheaper and it's something that's available to the masses. Because I think that the younger generations, people much younger than me who are starting to get married, are a lot less cynical and a lot less, prone to this. Oh, well, why would we have that if you don't trust me? It's just, it's, as Sexton said in Huberman and in Flagrant, which I listened to as well, everyone has a prenup. It's either written by the 2 people involved or it's written by the government. And if in the latter case, it can be changed at any time and it's really not up to you. So why would you not go ahead and just figure out something that's between the 2 people who ostensibly love each other? I think it's a reasonable point.
I'm old enough to remember when community property first started, and everybody was kind of back then when it first started, it generally, at least in the legal field, you had, prior to the time when you could not fraternize in the office, you had many marriages where senior partners in law firms were marrying receptionists or dating receptionists and things like that. And you had somebody who was the so-called breadwinner, usually a male, and the wife who was raising the kid, a more traditional or a throwback. And so then community property was, well, what do you do when the man who has now really kind of his career is in full-blown status, and then he trades the wife in after she's put her career on hold for a younger model? It happens, but for those of you who say, that doesn't only happen in the law. Yes, I know. It also happens with doctors, their wives, and nurses, and whatever. So
sure, it happens across the spectrum.
Across the spectrum. And one of the interesting things I remember years ago was Martina Navratilova, who was an early marriage in a lesbian marriage. And I'll never forget when her partner wanted to get her money, and Martina responded with something to the effect of, I'm the one who's busting, and sweating on the court and blah, blah. Why should she get part of this? Which is what a lot of, I think, kind of the pushback was with a lot of males. I think fast forward now where there isn't that kind of disparity, if you will, between the breadwinners that you may see. I'd be interested in talking to Sexton about it. I think you will see an evolution in the community property laws and how they figure that out, and the various things that the kind of what I think are somewhat antiquated now in the law, which, coming full circle, is what you can address in a prenup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should have James on in the near future and talk a little bit more about it. So anything on the horizon this week that you want to talk about? I'm not going to pull a Harvey Levin.
Harvey Levin.
I couldn't. It was hard enough to watch it last week. You guys can go check out Two Angry Men if you want to watch two angry men yell at each other and Harvey just have his head in his hands for half the episode because Mark was refusing to answer something that he was court mandated not to talk about. Yeah, it was ludicrous it was so stupid. But
and by the way, to the because I like the comments. The comments to Two Angry Men is, Harvey, you're diabolical, and stop interrupting Mark when he wants to talk about the history of Shepard versus Maxwell, because if I'm watching this isn't to watch two angry old men argue. It's to at least, I hope, listen to a little analysis.
Well, Mark, you're not a law professor. It was just, I get what he's doing. I understand that he's trying to get the scoop and get the headline, and he runs a business that is based on headlines. Fine. But the third fucking time that you've made it clear you're not going to talk about this, and Harvey well knows from reading the transcripts that you are court mandated not to talk about this, shut the fuck up. Let Mark talk. Let him do the thing he's going to do and he's willing to do, because yes, you've asked the question 3 times, but let's move on. Come on. It's
right. And by the way, it is an area of the law that I like talking about.
It was interesting. You were doing a good job.
For those who don't understand what we're talking about, I'm talking about the idea of gagging the defense and the idea of muzzling the defense, of saying that you can't talk, that it's a fact. What has happened is, and I hold us as criminal defense lawyers responsible. If we're not yelling loud enough, it isn't the government's right to a fair trial. The government has got all the odds. The government is the one who's, they've got, it's not the defense with a 99% acquittal rate. It's the government. They've got the burden of proof. They're the ones who win 98% of the time, and the other 2% of the time they beat you in a pulp. So the idea that somehow we're going to muzzle the defense, somehow that they've taken Shepard versus Maxwell, which if you listen to this podcast, I talk about endlessly, the case that F. Lee Bailey made his career on as a 29-year-old lawyer, where he went to the U.S. Supreme Court and got them to reverse the murder conviction for the doctor. And it subsequently became the TV series with David Jansen and the movie with
Harrison Ford.
Very good. And F. Lee Bailey convinced them that the carnival-like atmosphere prevented Shepard from getting the fair trial. Somehow, 70 years, fast forward 70 years later, now that has been turned on its head by the prosecution, saying that the defense can't talk, that the defense is going to pollute the jury pool. What a joke. The prosecution comes out, they announce with great fanfare, we got the guy. We've got all the evidence in the world. They've been indicted. They've got this, that, the other thing. And then the law enforcement's leaking like a sieve. God forbid that the defendant's lawyer is out there saying, wait a second here, and trying to respond. And I just think at some point, and ironically, under this administration, I think it will happen that SCOTUS is going to get a case and they're going to clarify it's the defendant's right to a fair trial. Stop muzzling the defense or trying to muzzle the defense and trying to stop turning the world on its head.
I'm stifling my inner Harvey, and I so desperately want to yell at you that you're not the defense attorney for this client, but we'll leave that for another day. I mean, Harvey did enough, and I don't need to be that guy. So, Mark, good luck this week. And
although you guys look about the same age, I give Harvey credit for those who don't know.
That better have been a compliment to Harvey, because I could easily take that as a slight. I look the same age as Harvey Levy. Get the fuck out of here.
You know how old he is?
I mean, he looks a lot younger than he is, but he's got to be 2 decades older than me.
Oh, how old are you now?
40.
Okay. Would you believe that Gary Patrick Smith plus the Menendez in custody?
That's what I'm saying. I knew he was older than I was being charitable with 2 decades because I don't want Harvey coming at me. I know how that guy is, and he's a force to be reckoned with.
Menendez in custody equals Harvey.
Yeah, no, he looks fantastic, but I wish he would just give you a chance to talk a little bit more. It's just, if nothing else, for me to be able to cut clips where I don't have to splice from one frame to the other every 3.5 seconds. It's something to deal with. But Mark, thank you very much for making some time on a Sunday, and good luck this week. We look forward to hearing from you next week, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, Gary. Talk to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.